The Middle East is on fire again, and what I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change how you understand this conflict. Israel has just executed one of the most audacious intelligence operations in modern warfare history, killing Iran's intelligence minister and security chief deep inside Tehran itself. This is not a border skirmish, not a proxy engagement, but a direct strike at the very heart of the Iranian establishment. Tehran is now vowing revenge, but the question everyone should be asking is whether Iran even has the capacity to respond effectively when its entire leadership structure is being systematically dismantled. The names you need to remember are Ali Larijani and Gholamreza Soleimani, and by the time I finish explaining what happened to them and why it matters, you will understand that we are witnessing something unprecedented in the history of Middle Eastern conflict. I want to take you inside this story because the implications extend far beyond the immediate headlines. Israel carried out targeted strikes in Tehran that eliminated Ali Larijani, who served as Iran's intelligence minister and security chief, alongside Gholamreza Soleimani, the commander of the Basij paramilitary forces. These were not random military targets chosen for their tactical value in some conventional battlefield sense. These were the architects of Iranian policy, the individuals who controlled the intelligence apparatus, the people who understood how the regime functioned at its most fundamental level. The Basij forces that Soleimani commanded represent one of the pillars of internal control that keeps the Islamic Republic functioning, and their commander is now dead because Israeli intelligence knew exactly where he would be and when he would be there. The significance of Israel reaching high-value targets deep inside Iran's capital cannot be overstated, particularly when we consider that this is happening 3 weeks into an active conflict. Tehran has always projected an image of impenetrable security, suggesting that whatever happened at its borders or through its proxies, the homeland itself remained a fortress. That narrative has been completely shattered. Israeli intelligence operations have demonstrated a level of penetration into Iranian society and government that should terrify anyone currently holding a position of authority in the Islamic Republic. The message being sent is unmistakable, and it is this: there is nowhere to hide, no building secure enough, no precaution sufficient to protect those whom Israel has designated as targets. This represents a severe blow to the Iranian establishment, and the psychological impact on remaining leadership figures must be profound. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi responded to these killings with the rhetoric we have come to expect, declaring that Tehran's political system remains strong and pledging revenge for the assassinations. However, I need to explain why analysts consider the loss of Ali Larijani particularly significant beyond his official titles. Larijani was widely regarded as a pragmatic figure within the Iranian establishment, a seasoned politician who understood the value of diplomatic channels and had demonstrated his capability. And in this regard, before the war started, he had led the nuclear talks that represented Iran's primary diplomatic engagement with the international community. He possessed something rare within the Iranian system: the credibility and the connections necessary to open channels of communication when circumstances required it. Some analysts have suggested that Israel's decision to eliminate Larijani specifically may have been aimed at closing precisely those diplomatic avenues that might otherwise provide a pathway to ending this war. By removing the individuals capable of negotiating, Israel may be signaling that it has no interest in a negotiated settlement and intends to pursue its military objectives until they are fully achieved. The broader pattern here deserves careful examination because what we are witnessing is a systematic decapitation strategy unlike anything previously attempted in modern conflict. Since this war began, Israel has killed not only Larijani and Soleimani, but also Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, himself the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Chief of Staff Abdul Rahim Mousavi, the head of intelligence for Iran's Emergency Command, the IRGC spokesperson, and numerous other senior military and political figures whose names have not yet been released to the public. The numbers are staggering when you consider the concentrated nature of this targeting. At least 40 Iranian officials were reportedly killed in the open sharks Yosakamar alone, representing a level of intelligence preparation that must have taken years to develop. This is not improvisation. This is the execution of a meticulously planned operation designed to leave Iran leaderless and incapable of coordinated response. I need to continue explaining this situation because the leadership crisis in Iran has reached a critical point that threatens to prolong this conflict indefinitely. Iran's new supreme leader is Mojtaba Khamenei, who succeeded his father Ali Khamenei after the elder Khamenei was assassinated on February 28th. The transition of supreme leadership in the Islamic Republic was always going to be a moment of vulnerability, but the circumstances under which this transition has occurred make it exponentially more dangerous for regional stability. Mojtaba Khamenei was appointed on March 8th, but here is the detail that should concern everyone watching this conflict. He has not made a single public appearance since that appointment, not one. No video address, no public ceremony, no visible demonstration that he is alive and functioning as the leader of the nation. A message attributed to Mojtaba Khamenei was read on state television, but no accompanying video or audio was provided to confirm that the message actually came from him. I want you to consider the implications of this absence carefully in a system where the supreme leader represents the ultimate religious and political authority, where his word is literally the final arbiter of all significant decisions. The lack of proof of life from the new leader raises fundamental questions about who is truly in charge of Iran right now. Is Mojtaba Khamenei alive? Is he making decisions? Is he in a secure location, communicating through intermediaries? Or has something happened to him that the regime cannot acknowledge without admit complete collapse? Now, these questions matter because you cannot negotiate a ceasefire with a ghost. There is no clear authority with whom to discuss terms, no individual who can credibly commit Iran to any agreement. This leadership vacuum could significantly prolong the conflict precisely because the normal mechanisms of war termination are absent. Wars typically end through negotiation, through one side recognizing that continued fighting serves no purpose, through leaders making difficult decisions about acceptable compromises. But if Iran's leadership structure has been so thoroughly dismantled that nobody has the authority to speak for the nation, then those negotiations cannot occur. Israel may continue its military operations indefinitely, claiming with some justification that there is no legitimate interlocutor with whom to discuss cessation of hostilities. Tehran vows revenge, but the practical question of who possesses the authority to order and coordinate that revenge remains unanswered. The Iranian security establishment is in chaos, its intelligence minister dead, its senior military commanders eliminated, its supreme leader either hiding or incapacitated. The killing of the IRGC spokesperson provides a particularly stark illustration of how complete Israeli intelligence penetration has become. Just hours before his death, this spokesperson had issued a statement directly responding to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's claim that Iran's missile production had been decimated. He insisted that Iran was having no problems producing and stockpiling missiles even during the war, projecting confidence and capability in the face of Israeli assertions to the contrary. Within hours, he was dead, killed by an Israeli strike that demonstrated exactly how much access Israeli intelligence has to real-time information about the locations and movements of senior Iranian officials. The timing cannot have been coincidental. The message was clear and brutal. We know where you are, we know what you are saying, and we can reach you at will. This vulnerability of Iran's leadership to Israeli intelligence operations represents perhaps the most significant strategic development of this conflict, suggesting that traditional concepts of strategic depth and defensive capability have been rendered obsolete by intelligence superiority. I want to be clear about what this pattern of decapitation strikes means for the future of this conflict and for the region more broadly. Israel has demonstrated a capability that no other nation in modern history has successfully deployed at this scale. The systematic elimination of an adversary's entire senior leadership structure while that adversary remains nominally at war. The Iranian regime has lost its supreme leader, its intelligence chief, its senior military commanders, its key security officials, all within a matter of weeks. The institutional knowledge, the personal relationships, the decision-making authority that resided in these individuals cannot be easily replaced. New appointees, assuming they survive long enough to actually assume their positions, will lack the experience and the networks necessary to function effectively. The Iranian state is being reduced to a shell, its capability for coherent action diminishing with each successful Israeli strike. The humanitarian dimensions of this conflict demand serious attention because the leadership strikes that I have been describing are not occurring in isolation from civilian populations. Many of the strikes have targeted government buildings and command centers located in urban areas, and the consequences for ordinary Iranians have been devastating. The Iranian Red Crescent Society has released figures indicating that more than 18,000 civilians have been injured since the war began. Now, 204 children have been killed. These numbers represent real families, real communities, real human beings caught in the crossfire of a conflict between states. Israel maintains that it is targeting military, intelligence, infrastructure, but that infrastructure exists within cities where millions of people live and work. Tehran itself has borne the brunt of this targeting, which makes geographical sense given that the Iranian government is headquartered there, but which also means that the capital city has become a battlefield. Historic sites have not been spared from this destruction. UNESCO has expressed concern after strikes damaged the Golistan Palace, a World Heritage Site located near Arg Square in Tehran. This palace represents centuries of Iranian cultural heritage, a tangible connection to the nation's history that transcends the current political arrangements. Its damage symbolizes something beyond the immediate military conflict, the potential loss of irreplaceable cultural patrimony in the fog of war. When we speak about the costs of this conflict, we must include not only the lives lost and the infrastructure destroyed, but also the heritage that may never be recovered, regardless of how this war eventually concludes. The question of proportionality haunts these developments, and reasonable people can disagree about where the lines should be drawn. Israel argues that it is engaged in legitimate self defense against an adversary that has repeatedly threatened its destruction and that maintains proxy forces designed to attack Israeli civilians. Iran argues that it is the victim of aggression by a nuclear armed state that operates with impunity and enjoys unconditional Western support. Both narratives contain elements of truth, and neither fully captures the complexity of a conflict that has deep historical roots and multiple contributing causes. What remains undeniable is that civilians are paying the price for decisions made by leaders, many of whom are now dead themselves. The 18,000 injured and 204 dead children did not choose this war, did not vote for the policies that led to it, and have no power to end it. They're simply trapped in the geography of conflict. Iran's vow of revenge raises immediate concerns about potential escalation that could draw in additional parties and expand the scope of destruction. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has pledged that Tehran will respond to these killings, but the practical questions remain about how such a response might be mounted given the current state of Iranian capabilities. The intelligence apparatus that would normally plan and coordinate significant operations has been decimated. The military leadership that would execute those plans is largely eliminated. The supreme leader who would authorize such actions remains invisible and possibly unreachable. Yet the political pressure within Iran to demonstrate some form of response is undoubtedly intense. A regime that absorbs this level of punishment without visible retaliation risks appearing weak to its own population, potentially inviting internal challenges that could prove more dangerous than the external threat. This dynamic creates incentives for some kind of response, even if that response is poorly planned and ultimately counterproductive. Escalation spirals often begin precisely this way, with wounded parties feeling compelled to act even when action serves no strategic purpose. The international community has responded to these developments with a mixture of concern and paralysis that reflects the difficulty of the situation. What leverage does anyone possess over parties that have already committed to maximum positions? Israel clearly believes that it can achieve its military objectives through continued strikes, eliminating Iranian leadership until someone emerges who is willing to accept terms that Israel will dictate. Iran clearly believes, or at least publicly maintains, that it can absorb these losses and eventually respond effectively. Neither side has shown any inclination toward de escalation, and the structural factors that might normally create pressure for negotiation are absent. I want to return to the strategic implications of what Israel has accomplished because the full significance may take years to become apparent. The ability to systematically eliminate an adversary's leadership represents a fundamental shift in how military power can be applied between states. Traditional warfare assumed that leadership was relatively protected, that capitals were sanctuaries where decisions could be made in relative security. Israel has demonstrated that this assumption no longer holds for any adversary whose security has been compromised by intelligence penetration. Tehran has vowed revenge repeatedly, but each vow has been followed by additional strikes that eliminate more officials, creating a cycle of humiliation that undermines Iranian deterrence capacity. The psychological impact on remaining Iranian officials must be extraordinary. Each survivor knows that they could be next, that their location may already be known, that the strike could come at any moment. This knowledge affects decision making in ways that are difficult to predict, but certainly consequential. The targeting of Ali Larijani specifically deserves additional analysis because his elimination suggests something important about Israeli objectives in this conflict. Larijani was not primarily a military figure in the conventional sense. His significance lay in his diplomatic capabilities, his experience with international negotiations, his understanding of how to navigate complex multi-party discussions. By removing him, Israel may have been signaling that it has no interest in the kind of negotiated settlement that Larijani might have been able to facilitate. This interpretation is consistent with the broader pattern of strikes, which have eliminated not only military commanders, but also political figures who might play roles in any eventual peace process. If Israel is pursuing a strategy of unconditional victory rather than negotiated settlement, the elimination of potential negotiators makes perfect sense. The implications for how this war might eventually end are profound and troubling. The Basij forces that Gholamreza Soleimani commanded deserve explanation because Western audiences may not fully understand their role within Iranian society. The Basij are a paramilitary organization that operates under the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, functioning as both a mobilization force and an instrument of internal control. They were instrumental in suppressing the Green Movement protests in 2009 and have been deployed repeatedly against domestic dissent. Soleimani's death leaves this organization without its commander at a moment when the Iranian regime faces unprecedented pressure from both external military attack and potential internal unrest. The civilians experiencing the destruction of their cities and the deaths of their children may not remain passive forever. Without effective Basij leadership to control potential protests, the regime faces dangers from within that compound the dangers from without. Israeli intelligence almost certainly understood these dynamics when selecting their targets. The 40 officials reportedly killed in the opening strikes alone represent an intelligence achievement that should not be underestimated. Compiling the information necessary to locate and target that many senior figures simultaneously required years of patient collection, the cultivation of sources within Iranian institutions, the development of technical capabilities for surveillance and tracking, and the operational planning to execute coordinated strikes before targets could disperse or increase security. This level of preparation suggests that the current war, whatever its immediate triggers, was anticipated and planned for long before hostilities commenced. Israel maintained the capability to strike Iran's leadership at any moment and chose this moment to exercise that capability. The reasons for that timing, whether defensive, preventive, or opportunistic, remain subjects of debate, but the capability itself is now demonstrated beyond any doubt. Other adversaries of Israel are undoubtedly reconsidering their own security arrangements in light of these events. The succession crisis created by Ali Khamenei's assassination on February 28th continues to reverberate through the Iranian system in ways that compound all other difficulties. Mojtaba Khamenei's appointment as supreme leader was itself controversial, representing a quasi monarchical succession that contradicted the revolutionary principles the Islamic Republic was ostensibly founded upon. Many Iranians, including some within the establishment, viewed the appointment with skepticism or outright opposition. His subsequent invisibility has only deepened those concerns. A supreme leader who cannot or will not appear publicly lacks the charismatic authority that his father cultivated over decades. I need to bring this analysis to a conclusion by considering where this conflict might lead and what the international community might do about it, if anything. The pattern we have observed with Israel systematically eliminating Iranian leadership while Iran vows revenge but struggles to mount effective response cannot continue indefinitely. Either Iran will eventually succeed in conducting a significant retaliatory operation that changes the dynamics, or the Iranian state will effectively collapse under the pressure of continued decapitation strikes, or some external intervention will create conditions for de escalation. None of these outcomes appears imminent, which suggests we should prepare for a prolonged period of instability with the potential for significant escalation at any moment. Tehran has vowed revenge too many times to simply accept defeat, yet its capacity to deliver on those vows diminishes with each passing day. The death toll among civilians, particularly the 204 children killed according to the Iranian Red Crescent Society, represents a moral dimension that cannot be ignored regardless of one's views on the strategic merits of the conflict. Children bear no responsibility for the decisions of governments. They possess no capacity to influence the policies that led to their deaths. Their elimination from the living world constitutes a tragedy that should weigh on the conscience of all parties involved. The 18,000 injured civilians similarly represent human beings whose lives have been permanently altered by violence they did not choose and could not prevent. Any assessment of this conflict that focuses exclusively on strategic calculations while ignoring these human costs fails to capture the full reality of what is occurring. Nations have interests, but people have lives, and those lives are being destroyed at an alarming rate. The damage to cultural heritage sites like the Golestan Palace near Arg Square in Tehran adds another dimension to the losses being sustained. UNESCO's concerns reflect an understanding that some things, once destroyed, cannot be rebuilt or replaced. The Golestan Palace survived centuries of history, witnessed the rise and fall of dynasties, embodied the artistic and architectural achievements of Persian civilization. A strike that damages such a site destroys something that belonged not only to Iran, but to human humanization as a whole. Future generations will inherit a world with less beauty and less connection to the past because of choices made in the present moment of conflict. This consideration cannot override security imperatives in the calculations of warring parties, but it should at least register as a cost worth acknowledging and, where possible, minimizing. The question of who is actually governing Iran right now remains unanswered and may be unanswerable from outside the country. Mojtaba Khamenei has not appeared publicly since his appointment. The senior military and intelligence leadership has been largely eliminated. As the foreign minister issues statements, but it is unclear what authority he possesses or who is making the decisions he announces. This ambiguity creates both dangers and opportunities. The danger is that nobody has clear authority to negotiate or to restrain military actions that might trigger further escalation. And the opportunity is that the very chaos within the Iranian system might create space for new voices or new approaches that would not have been possible under the previous leadership structure. Whether that opportunity can be seized depends on factors that remain opaque to outside observers. I have taken you through this story because understanding what is happening between Israel and Iran matters for the future of the Middle East and potentially for the world. The unprecedented nature of Israel's decapitation campaign, the collapse of Iranian leadership structures, Tehran's repeated vows of revenge, the humanitarian costs being borne by civilians, the destruction of irreplaceable cultural heritage, all of these elements combine to create a situation of extreme volatility. What happens next depends on decisions that will be made by individuals whose names we may not yet know, in circumstances we cannot fully predict. But by understanding the current situation clearly, we position ourselves to interpret future developments intelligently. The killing of Ali Larijani and Gholamreza Soleimani represents not an ending but a continuation, and where this continuation leads remains the defining question of this conflict.